All right. Adrian.
Hey, Mr. Tommy G.
How are you?
Hey, I'm top of the world, my friend. Top of the
I
world.
feel like I'm in a nightclub.
Yeah, but got my Pink Floyd t-shirt on.
There we go. All right. So, how was your weekend, my friend?
Well, very social on Saturday and very soulful on Sunday, of course.
Wasn't Sunday such a soulful day? I mean, I was down the beach and it was like mesmerizing, and people were out. I had doggies running around at the northern end of the beach. Didn't know you could do that. And it was just the sun, the weather, people. It was, I don't know. It felt like a really, really good day on Sunday.
And how was the surf? I caught some beautiful waves of body surfing. I did get tumbled a couple of times, I must admit, but I got some beautiful long 40-meter runs on my body. It's ecstatic, mate. It was
Wow.
and they had a little market here as well, Tommy, on Sunday. The Gold Coast markets have started up again every Sunday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is absolutely fantastic. So there were probably 50 stores here in Broady, and then there's going to be Surfers, Broady, and I think somewhere else every weekend on a Sunday.
Yeah.
The markets have started up. Now the COVID thing's finished here on the Goldie, thankfully.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't that great? I mean, everything's kind of, well, at least here in Queensland, opened up, and we've been spoiled with sport as well. We've become the sporting centre of Australia, Adrian.
AFL is here.
AFL, I mean, anything with an FL. The ARL, the NFL, and anything L seems to be here in Queensland.
Yeah, and we've got AFL, NFL, and we've got a few Qs, haven't we, Tommy? With CAP, we've got IQ, EQ, RQ, SQ,
right,
and a few other Qs if we want them as well, of course.
And hopefully on Wednesday night, when we go to the St Kilda and the Gold Coast
Suns game, yes,
that there aren't too many far Qs.
Yeah, there might be a few coming for you, mate. Being a Saints supporter myself, so you might be putting a few expletives out there, I'd imagine, every time we score a goal against you.
Well, I was thinking of far queues as in long queues to wait to get in.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay, sure, whatever. All right, so let's get back to it. Let's get into it.
Tommy G, today we're all about relationship intelligence.
Relationship quotient. Now, I'm gonna be a little on the vulnerable thing here and say that I had not heard about RQ until about 2 or 3 months ago. I'm sure it's been in your vernacular for decades, Adrian.
A long time.
Right. There I was stuck in the paradigm of the business world, and we were still trying to cope with EQ, let alone RQ. Right. And just to add a little extra challenge, as I usually get on the Monday, connecting RQ with physiology and a bit of psychology, that's going to be a little bit of work today, I think.
Yeah, look, I think it's just a case of focus on how does the relationship intelligence have an impact on the physiological and if you like, the psychological as well, and getting an understanding of the downside if we don't get connected to RQ.
Right.
What happens to the body if that intelligence doesn't come to the fore, if we're not engaged in that intelligence, what's detrimental for us, but what are the benefits, Tommy? And that's where I'd like to go with you today in terms of what are the benefits of getting in touch with RQ from a physiological and psychological perspectives. So I want to throw that question at you straight up, my friend, is some of the benefits of becoming, relationship intelligence. Bringing it into our lives. Right. How do you see that benefiting us from a physiological perspective?
Right. So we're getting a little bit of feedback coming through there. I don't know why, but look, RQ. I mean, if we start there first, before we start getting into, so people can understand what we're talking about, before we get into how it connects to physiology, my understanding is, we're starting to sort of talk about things like our inner senses first and how we are relating to ourselves, right, from a relationship point of view, and then externally, it being expressed in the form of like, here's the big one, trust, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
And that can take two angles, because one is, especially in the business environment, trust with regards to someone's character.
You're in touch. Sorry, got technology happening all over the place here.
So how we can you went on Tinder or something there, were you, Adrian? Is it like someone responsible?
That was a Bixby, which is the stupid device they've got on the bloody Telstra.
I thought you were trying to lift your RQ through Tinder.
Just for live, I've got these two characters live.
Oh, there they are.
There they are.
Right. So yeah, you got to cut the volume there too. It's coming through, but I thought you might have been on Tinder trying to increase your RQ. But anyway. So
my wife wouldn't let me do
that. Of course, yeah, and that's okay. We're just going live to the whole planet that's willing to watch. Yeah. So trust is a big one, and that goes down into two areas. I think trust of character and trust in the business context as well. If I trust them with my order, or trust them with depending on them to get this thing done, do they have the capability to actually do it, right? Is a different version of that trust as well. Forgiveness, right?
Ooh, that's a big one in business. Like maybe that's a great angle to go from a physiological relationship business perspective. How do you meld those three together? There's a challenge for you. How do you meld those three together?
Yeah, and then we'll throw in integrity just to cap it off a little bit more complex, right? And even hope, compassion, all these things, right? From a heart, we're coming from a heart-centered point of view. And if someone reads the ticker that we've got going down the bottom there, oh my God, what an amazing coincidence. We're talking about soul and heart-led leadership. Go figure. I mean, we're talking about RQ here, right? And it's right in the depths of that. So yeah, let's start to unpack a couple of these. I think trust's an easy one to warm up the hamstring before we go pulling it in the others. When we're talking relationship, and I guess coming away from EQ last week as well, Adrian, too. I'm interested also in because these are areas that you've dealt with for a long time. At a deeper point of view, we're talking about trust and let's say forgiveness.
Yeah. So a lot of this relationship, the IQ is very similar to the EQ, and there's many parallels where they do cross over and lap over, Tommy.
Right. So then we're talking RQ, we're talking those values that we just mentioned. So I'll just reel them off for people again. Trust, forgiveness, integrity, hope, compassion.
Yep.
Versus EQ.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd say the two key ones here for me in the IQ, Tommy, also are communication and connection.
Right.
Communication is the relationship. Connection is the relationship. Because the trust, the forgiveness, integrity, hope, compassion, they are in that emotional space. They are in that feeling space. So that I sense their values of the aspect of the relationship intelligence, but the bigger aspect for me is that communication and connection. Right. That's where the relationship happens.
Right.
Yeah. So these are ways we do the relationship. We do relationship with trust, forgiveness, integrity, hope, and compassion.
Right.
But the overarching aspect of, for me, relationship intelligence IQ is the communication.
So, okay, so if we, let's say, made a picture of this in a way that the pipe that connects, so you've got this pipe that's connecting through either verbal communication, non-verbal communication, we'll talk a bit more about that later, then the stuff that's going in the pipe is going to be those trust, forgiveness, integrity, hope, compassion, etc. Right? So that's how
that's how the communication is delivered or is not delivered.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And to have an effective relationship, to have a really good relationship, you gotta kind of get these things right within yourself first, right, before the other. You're not sort of like saying, "Hey, I want you to be more forgiving and trusting and everything else." It's about you first getting those things.
And if we get that right, Tommy, you know, the body and the mind will respond in one way. If we don't get it right, the body and mind will obviously respond in another way. And I just want to share some of those differences of how the body will respond positively and how it's not so positive.
Right. Okay. So thank you for the leg up segue into that, because that's, when we start looking at the physiology behind this, and if you haven't got those things happening, they're going to have a negative effect on your physical existence in your meat suit, or as it was described by Paul Chek, I was listening to on the weekend. He called it a soul with matter wrapped around it, right? Yep. So that meat suit, that thing gets negatively affected. The soul gets negatively affected. That then manifests physically in a lower frequency form, if you want to get into the quantum physics side of this, yep, in your body. And once again, we're going back to potential chronic disease if this is happening for a decade or so, right? Yep. So then what do we need to do to start to improve our RQ? Someone says, okay, and especially in business, because not only in personal relationships, business relationships, they're relationships, they're all relationships. And once again, corporate world is getting ripped off if people aren't tapping into their RQ. They're ripping themselves off from a wellness and health point of view. So how do we get people to, first of all, they've got to become aware, but then start to make the transition to expressing more compassion and hope and things like that,
Yeah. And when we do that, Tommy, what's the upshot from doing that positively? What happens physiologically?
Well, physiologically, yeah. I'll go on. I'll take a couple of little angles on this. One is that, let's go to the quantum field. Your actual, from a heart point of view, is gut, which is our electromagnetic, and it's not a 5G frequency, right? It's a different frequency, right? But that, instead of having it small and not really emitting much of an energy and frequency, it gets bigger. In fact, it's been measured to be 1.5 meters in that will be in radius. So a 3 meter.
We did that with the dowsing rods last week, mate, didn't
we? Exactly. That was freaky. And then I tried it and I thought, no, I'm going to keep these straight so they don't so you don't sort of like tilt them in and they sort of swing in. And those things were moving. So that was a real realization to me, right? When you measured my EMF field as you walked closer and closer. And then I did with you and I thought, whoa, okay, I'm not manipulating it now. So this is real. This is science. And it's quantum physics. So when that field's bigger, that means you're coming from that point of more compassion, hope, integrity, and that affects people. People don't realize it, but that electromagnetic field, people will feel the compassion, the trust, the love, and everything else that's coming from.
And tons of megahertz in there, Tommy. 400 megahertz of power.
Right. Exactly. Healthy human frequencies, not the ones that we artificially have made that, now we're in this EMF soup of who knows what, right? Then let's take it from the other angle. What's it doing to you physically? Well, if you're resonating at a low frequency and you're sort of into that point where there isn't forgiveness and there's, what would be the opposite of forgiveness?
Hatred. Hatred.
Anger, hope, hopelessness, compassion. Well, it's more of a, F you rather than compassion, right? Trust. No, not trusting anybody. I can do this all on my own. And you've just completely disconnected yourself from the rest of humanity. And when you do that, if a cell in the body does that, that's the C word, right? I'm not going to mention the whole word. That's what those little rogue cells, C cells, right? We know what I'm saying, the C word, right? When they go rogue and they disconnect, and in fact, their energy drops off to what they call their without getting too techy, there's a word, two words, phase angle. The actual polarity between the membrane cell and the inside from negative to positive should be around 70, minus 70, I think it's microvolts. Might have the wrong unit. When that lowers, they're not talking to each other. They're disconnecting out, and they're becoming what they call senescent cells. They're like zombie cells. And C cells, right, CANCER cells, behave this way. Now, if you're doing this on a macro level as a human, you can actually start to bring on negative physiological elements in your physical existence.
Yep.
It's not cool. It's bad for you. I mean, in anger, what tends to form mainly around the lower back and the kidneys.
And the prostrate.
Prostrate, right? And so what do you know, right? These emotions go and live somewhere, and you've got to get rid of them. And the ego doesn't like letting go of those things, Adrian.
No, absolutely. I don't, mate. I've got a few little pockets myself of those emotions that I have been dealing with for 20, 30 years, and particularly my men's work. Great thing about men's work is we do look at emotions, which is great, negative emotions. And I know myself, having dealt with some of those, and quite effectively, I must say, in some areas, my health and well-being, I feel healthy, I feel vibrant. I don't feel like I've got lumps and bumps I have to deal with, because I've done a lot of the emotional work.
Right.
But I know if I hadn't, my body would be feeling very different.
Right.
I would be aware of those energy blockages and the lumps and the bumps in my body, I'm sure.
Right. So that's from a personal level, but also on a business level. When you've got these leaders, and I've seen them, these ones that really care for their team, they're compassionate for their team, they trust their team, they forgive their team, they exercise integrity, they do what they say they're going to do. These are the leaders that the corporate world is starving for. And some of them exist nowhere near enough. Some of them are making the transition to get there. And the big upside that does turn into this other form of value, which today is measured by currency, dollars and cents, that stuff comes out in the end when you're getting this stuff right. And if you're a company that's obviously, they're all in a recruitment talent war, but you've got these sorts of leaders in your organization, that ends up being top line and bottom line results at the end of the day too.
Yeah. So Tommy, those effective leaders, they have their IQ switched on, hey? They have the relationship, communication, connection switch on.
Yep. Yeah.
Delivering that communication process effectively.
Yep. And these guys they're under a lot of pressure, because the pressure they get hit with constantly is either they're listed in Wall Street, and that just comes through the whole system and permeates down through the whole organization, which is connected to Wall Street. At the same time, the smart ones know that have enough IQ, EQ, and RQ, that they've got to hold it together underneath them in what's currently, the hierarchical structure, right? And I think that's going to be changing in future. I think, in fact, I'm going to put it out there and say, mark my words. And
you heard it on this TV station first.
Yeah, and what's really cool is that, because I wrote a vision statement around this, right? About 2 years ago, saying that I could see the corporate world moving from a hierarchical structure to more of a network and hub type structure within the organization, and then how they would engage, which is where I operate around building partner ecosystems to other organizations. McKinsey & Co., if you don't know who they are, I mean, they're like top-end consultants. I've worked with them a couple of times on different projects. So they've got some pretty smart people in there. And I saw a slide recently on a presentation where they showed that very same thing, where they see it moving from like this triangular hierarchical to being actually a network with a center, right? Which is obviously what we're
about the cap structure, mate.
That's it. That's the cap. Right, exactly how we're doing Corporate Alchemist Project, being center and hubs, and these centers can kind of move around a bit. So there's we're in an interesting phase in the world right now where I think some cracks are appearing, and what do you know? We're starting first with decentralizing where people are physically located because of this thing called CV19, right? Where now, in fact, there was a post in the Corporate Alchemist Project from one of the members stating that, people are going to have to be, for organizations to operate now, they need to be able to have good connections from the home, and you've got Optus here also saying, hey, look, we've got your Wi-Fi service, and if it isn't working, there's going to be an automatic seamless switch over to your 4G or whatever through your phone that you won't even notice the difference when there's an outage or the drop in bandwidth.
Yeah.
That's the start of building a distributed workforce. First physical manifestation of that hub forming, of that and that network.
Yeah, it's interesting is when we get into that RQ space, some of the language that's been used for a while in business is social credits.
Right.
I'm just wondering about, for you to connect that idea, Tommy, up of social credits and RQ and what that does also for, the physiological and how that's beneficial physiologically when we get into the social credit side of things.
Fantastic point. I mean, social capital, right, is going to be, I think it's going to be up there with, carbon trading to a degree, where you're earning points. And I've seen some sort of like 360 testing, where when you get a 360 done on you in the corporate world, it's like sometimes you think, oh shit, what have I done wrong? Why are they getting me to do the 360? Which is about doing an assessment of people that you would choose, and you had to choose like one or two above you, a couple to the side as peers, and then a couple that report up to you. And they have to do a survey to give feedback back to HR or personal development or whatever positive metaphor you want to call it, right, on how you're being perceived in the organization. And these things can be somewhat politically, motivated as well, right?
Oh, you didn't use manipulator. I'm glad.
Right. So, all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to pick these people because they really love me, and then I'm going to be really nice to them while I'm doing, just like leading up to the test, knowing that I've got to do it the next month. It's like going for an election in the US, right, or anywhere, right? It's like going for an election. So a certain amount of it's just BS, right? Yeah. But what you're saying is a social capital, though, whether we can deliver it or not properly and to measure it, is very important. And I think there are ways that now, even with devices, right, where, short of doing a polygraph test to see if you're lying, where we can start to actually track how much and what frequency people are operating at. And in fact, I know that with a device that is the first I've seen come to market from a mainstream point of view, technology that actually scans your, you can call them chakras or energy centers, right, for the business world and for the science world. And they're seeing where your energy is and how much is coming from the heart, how much is coming from other parts. I mean, you'd be able to explain that better than me, right, on keep that stuff balanced. I mean, how does that kind of play out for a well-balanced individual, especially when it comes to RQ, for example?
Yeah, look, if the chakras are still on that spinning, there's not much energy, so chakra just means wheel, from the esoteric Eastern perspective. And as the energy is spinning or moving,
right,
it's in flow. But when the chakras come to a still point, or they atrophy, or they're not moving, there's no energy flow, and then there's blockage in the chakra. So chakra just simply means wheel, like it's a movement.
Right.
So we have 7 major movement aspects to our being, and when they're all like a cog and they're all moving, there's an energy flow. But when one is a bit blocked by physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual blockage, it'll seize up. It just needs a bit of WD-40,
Right.
to get going again. Bit of lubrication.
Yeah.
And some of that is around, relationship intelligence. How do I connect my heart to another?
Right.
How do I connect my communication to another?
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of IQ is connected around those energy centers. It's quite new in some quarters. The relationship quotient. It's just coming to the fore, but it's actually been around for hundreds of years, just with different labels and different names.
Right.
It's a bit like the idea of was it heart brain and will brain and intellectual brain. I mean, I've been studying that for 30 years. Rudolf Steiner was writing about that 120 years ago, so it's not new.
He's fascinating, that guy. I've been seeing more and more about him, apart from, like, we've talked about his biodynamics.
Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner.
He was a freak. The guy was a freak.
Yeah.
Before his time. I mean, a lot of stuff he didn't come out with until, like, later on in his life or whatever, didn't he? I mean, it's like...
Yeah, well, he died in 1925, so anything pre-1925, which was 100 years ago, he was writing about the thinking, the feeling, and the willing, and the heart and the mind and the will. I've been studying that myself for 30 years, so I read a lot now. We've got these new, heart-centered brains as well. That's not new. It's and he was writing from texts from the Greeks, the ancients. This stuff's been around for thousands of years. Thousands of years.
Wow. I mean,
we just lost touch.
How and why? It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, and for so long, some dark force came in from somewhere, either control, power, aliens. I don't know.
A bit of everything, Matt. I think.
Bit of everything. Bit of a mixed up mess of everything. Yet we knew it back then.
Yeah.
And
the human ego was born as well. So the ego came into play, of course. That was, the ego hasn't always been around in the strength it is now. So human ego has grown. The greed has grown. Some of those negative RQs have grown. Greed is it's a relationship quotient. It's part of the soul.
Absolutely.
That's grown. Greed has grown.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the which is a survival instinct, right? Thing. It's like a fear. It's a dark force. And the ego, with, I guess, the prefrontal cortex, exploded 30 or 40,000 years ago. So we became so good at rationalizing, analyzing, but then the ego kind of like disproportionately grew for our own good as well, it seems, And here we are now, I think, with the world sort of starting to wake up and go, hang on, and people being able to become observant of their ego and go, okay, that impulse I feel, but that's because it's coming from my ego, like winning at all costs. And even we're talking in the last decade or two, and still today, so many organizations, corporate or non-profit, whatever, it's leaders, it's about win at all costs. I mean, WTF on that one. How does that work?
So something new coming from that space now, Tommy, that's been around, probably I'd say less than a decade, certainly in the spheres I've been working in, is the moving away from competition, into the collective support, into that collaboration.
Right. Unification.
That's new. And and once again, we're back to RQ. Like, that's relationship intelligence, is to work with me, not against me.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest movements of RQ in business. We are heading into that new place of collaboration.
So that's I was listening to, once again, that podcast, Paul Check. It's fascinating. It's on my list. I wanted to share it out. But talking about people unifying, connecting to the common cause versus those that are just self-focused for their own survival. And so I think we see that rift, and I think people have woken up, and all this stuff we've got on censorship and whatever on, social, which was supposed to be freedom of speech, has now become censored as well. where we've got all these issues, and you think, okay, money seems to perhaps be talking for like, when did social become judge, jury, and executioner to a degree? So just an electronic version of the issue we had in the old paper form seems to have all of a sudden re-emerged. But getting back to RQ and physiology, all these things are connected. So we sort of needed to sort of like bring up that whole connected system. And if people and leaders are listening now and they're going, okay, I've got to act in that space. And even if they're thinking to perform best, although if everybody looks in their heart versus their brain, they should know. They should know as humans deep in their heart that they should be doing these things, every single one of us anyway.
So that's called consciousness, Tommy, isn't it?
Well, you're the expert, Mr. Hanks. I'm going to give you a rhetorically answered yes on that one. Right?
Yeah.
Consciousness. And I think we see a mass consciousness happening across the planet right now. Would you agree? No? Acceleration?
It's an interesting question that I sit with, because in my circles, yes.
Right.
Because it's what I'm looking for.
Yep. I'm drawing on.
It could be an illusion that the planet's getting more conscious because I'm meeting more conscious people because of my circle.
Right.
If I step out of my circle, because I'm put myself on that pedestal. I live in those conscious circles. But if I take myself out of that and go and plant myself in some other aspect of society, would I feel it there?
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to live in the illusion that we're becoming more conscious, because when I look around me, I do see aspects of consciousness popping up, but in the main, I still don't know if it's growing.
Right. So I would err on the side of hope.
Yeah.
Even further. Right. Hopeful. Yeah. Okay. What we are seeing on TV and the mainstream media right now, and the fact that there is pain, and there is this social earthquake, I would say, to a degree, and these rifts and this discontent and this fear and all these things, tells me something good is actually around the corner. There's a tension in the system.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I didn't see a tension in the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful based on that now something will happen. Something's going to give.
Yeah. And I think once again, we have to get that critical mass of people, enough people saying yes or no or whatever the issue. Like over the weekend, Berlin, I lived in Berlin. So Berlin is a big part of my world. I lived there for I'm a Berliner. I was there for 4 years of my life. And over the weekend, 1 million people came to the streets. 1 million people in Berlin came to the streets. So go and, Dr. Google it.
Wow.
Have a look at videos in Berlin. 1 million people on the streets saying we've had enough of this COVID lockdown nonsense. 1 million people on the streets.
Wow.
The city of only, I don't know what Berlin is now, maybe 4 million or 5 million, I don't know, but
isn't that coming from a part of the world that was the center of fascism, perhaps back in the Second World War, was like
and right up until the wall came down in 1989.
Right.
Behind the wall, I lived in West Berlin, but behind that wall, in terms of that fascist communist space,
right.
That's only been broken down 30, 40 years ago.
Well, maybe they're the ones that are kind of like revolt fit, based on that being so proximate that then, well, we did it then, we're doing it again. We ain't happy, right?
Yeah. Well, the Berlin Wall came down without any bloodshed.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Amazing for it to come from there, and maybe that's going to kick something off around the planet, to the energy that's going to come from that, Adrian.
Yeah, look, one would hope that Berlin is first, and then maybe New York, and then Melbourne or wherever we have to get critical mass We
Yeah,
have to
right.
get this, relationship with each other in terms of that intelligence,
Yeah,
so that we're all fighting for the same thing. We're all, wishing and visioning for the same thing.
yeah,
And that's education. We're back to relationship education. We're back to social education, which is
right.
part of the IQ, of course. It's all about education.
I mean, the IQ, let's get the data and the information in there first, right? And then connecting to knowing oneself from an emotional point of view, went through that last week. And that's still very much embodied within an individual. Now we're stepping outside. We're starting to step outside the individual. First phase is, okay, now the relationship piece, relationship quotient with oneself,
Yes.
right? And trusting, forgiving, and showing integrity and compassion, so on, for oneself, then gets projected outside. And whether it's in any relationship, and not only is the corporate world getting ripped off, but the world is, you are ripping yourself off by not being able to get past that ego, right? And all of us have our tendencies, but that first step is obviously that awareness or consciousness, as you would call it, to then go, okay, because once you focus your energy somewhere, we know what happens, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So it starts to change. Once you see it, it actually starts to change. Energy starts to flow in that direction. Energy goes where, what is it? The awareness grows, or, where your focus is.
Yep.
So,
Totally.
right.
So, Tommy, a question for you on that one. In terms of the business corporate space,
Yeah.
what practical things people can do from that leadership role to bring this into the organization to start fermenting this in the space, in the business space?
It's funny. It's and thanks for the question, by the way. But when I'm working with executives, they come to me for what they want.
Yeah.
And the want is based around, I look like crap, or they're feeling they've lost their energy, or their relationships not so much an issue, because I work first in the physiological, because everybody kind of understands and trusts that space that's been in the old paradigm of, to feel better and for my world to be fantastic, I need to go and lose weight.
Yep.
Right? And we see it programmed from Instagram to Facebook and whatever, and the before and afters and whatnot. And so I go, okay, you're coming for that? Fine. So it ends up being a case of, they come for what they want, to then find out what they actually need. And why is that? Because it's connected to the very things that we have been talking about for as long as we've been doing this, mind you, as in the Corporate Alchemist Project, but more proximate. If we talk about RQ and EQ and IQ, it starts to connect back into emotions, back into the reptilian brain, in which case you've got the amygdala sitting in there as well, that has the old database of all the memories. And that's where I find I get to week 5 or 6 with execs. All of a sudden we're moving from what's the eating, moving, and sleeping, that their physical meat suit that's wrapped around their soul needs, right? To then they're thinking, why am I being held to the dock? Why can't I release from this? Why am I not making progress? Why am I not complying in the program? Right? It gets down to some emotional stuff. That's a lot of it sitting in the subconscious, as you would very well know. And so that's when coaching actually really comes into play. The first part was a whole lot of, here's some great solutions, information, technology, and we can monitor you and all this. And they go, yeah, cool. To then that's all in there, and that's in place. And then, why am I not getting results here? And it's okay, well, let's go there. Let's double click. Fish always starts to rot in the head. And that's where we kind of end up, is going into the head and then seeing where that's connected to. So, yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah. So in terms of, if you're going to walk into a space, Tommy, into an office space with 30, 40 workers, and you had something to deliver to them that was really practical to do this week, to change the paradigm, to get something moving, to let them have a taste of something that we know works that we know is going to be life-changing, what would that thing be? What would you take in? What would your gift be to that organization?
Interestingly, so here's what would start to really make the change. It's when that you and I both know as professional coaches that once again the want versus the need. But the thing that really starts to make the change, and one that resonates with most, some of them meditation doesn't quite do it yet. That's a bit too woo-woo-y for them. But journaling's a bit more seen as a pragmatic way, right? And so they start to write down because they're used to planning and so on, these leaders, but and they can be very disciplined and structured and consistent. Using these strengths that are innate, that they've either learned behaviors or are coming from a deeper place. Okay, this is what I want you to do just for a few minutes every morning. And what they're starting to do is to build awareness and that consciousness. And they start to focus on those things each day and reminding themselves that the internal chatter starts to change to connecting into themselves. And that's when that happens repeatedly. It starts to project enough times onto the subconscious where they're going to start making some different decisions and getting some different insights.
Yeah. So would you say, Tommy, that journaling is having a relationship with self?
Having a relationship with self, because absolutely, because we have been, without getting too conspiracy-like or being perceived as such, that we have been disconnected from ourselves.
Yeah.
And in so doing, we actually become disconnected from those that are around us because we're not connecting in through the soul. What we've connected into is a program and all of the stimulation that's out there now, right? I mean, we've seen it change just in our lifetimes, Adrian, from, show my age a bit, but I remember when TVs went from black and white to color and there was like 3 or 4 channels and that was it.
Yeah.
But we were so much more, I think, connected to people and we got torn away and our brains got locked into the matrix, if you will, right? I'm sure that, the technology followers here will understand what I'm talking about. Those who haven't seen Keanu Reeves' movie, The Matrix, and the fantastic trilogy, and what a seriously scary message that was.
I think more people have probably seen that than Top Gun, haven't they?
Oh, come on.
Got you there.
Maybe. Hey, the new one's out very soon. You and I are going to see that.
I saw The Matrix before I saw Top Gun.
Right. I mean, The Matrix. I mean, it's funny. We used to watch Dick Tracy as kids, right? The cartoon, and right, and look at it. It looks exactly the same. We thought, wow, imagine when that happens. Is that really happen?
That's coming too.
And so now, right. And so now, though, The Matrix is the recent one, and that could be happening. We talk about Elon Musk and whoever, he'll be the first with the Neuralink.
I don't think it's good.
Right. It's a scary.
It's here.
This stuff can be right. So this is Greg Braden also would argue the same as you're saying. And I think, well, let's switch off the internet in that case and hold up all progress. And I think these things can be used for good and they can be used for bad just as equally. And so we're dealing with dynamite. In fact, we're dealing with highly radioactive stuff in the levers and the technology and AI that's coming out right now that could do amazingly fantastic stuff, but in the wrong hands with the wrong values and some dark forces that are out there could do irreparable damage to human existence. Really.
Steel, you can make a plowshare or a gun. The same substance.
Right. Perfect. Right. Yeah. And so I'm not going to write it off as bad or good. It certainly won't be boring because we're in for a bigger ride if we haven't had already. But getting back to that original point, our brains and everything got locked into the matrix, and a lot of the forces out there that are controlling. And, we've got a situation of having those that are very rich. And I think, and corporate worlds obviously have a huge, huge responsibility on what's happening on the planet right now. And where is that all centrally controlled? Regardless, leaders in organizations, I think, have a responsibility to just
Yeah.
do what the right thing is. And the heart knows, the mind thinks, and people know what the right thing is to do.
Yeah, it's got to go past Wall Street, doesn't it?
The current system ain't supporting, I think, where the world should be going, and it's heading off, I think, in a direction that's questionable. And I think what's happening right now around the planet, coming out of the US particularly, interestingly, they also have the biggest issues still with CV-19. That could be the beginning of some big changes. But I'm glad to see there's tension in the system, though, because now we're having to wake up and we're having to think. We're having to rethink and make some internal decisions from an IQ, EQ perspective, and RQ is where it's at right now. We need to reconnect as humans to what really is right and what's important, I think. And then business, I know it, and the corporate world, and whatever structure it happens to be, and however business results happen, that will be secondary to getting the right leadership and getting people connected up from a heart-led point of view.
Yeah. For me, Tommy, there's always three different currencies I work with: time, energy, and money.
Right.
When we bring in some time and some energy economy in terms of having time for people, having energy for people, as well as having money for people, then we can change the paradigm.
We totally do. And, I'm going to distill that down even further and say energy.
Yeah.
Because I know, I've learned everything is energy.
Yep.
And your frequency, you're talking about energy and information. Everything on the planet is that. And if you learn how to manage and lead from that point of view in everything that you do, that changes the whole ball game.
Yeah, it is. Everything is energy. The way we communicate is energetic. The way we touch is energetic. The way we transact any business is an energy exchange.
Totally.
Everything is energy. And I think the more we use that language in business, the more we use that language amongst ourselves and start to talk, and not just talk about energy, but let's do some study on energy, like we did the other day. We got the dowsing rods, we measured some energy fields.
We did. It was real.
We can do kinesiology. We can look at brain waves. We can look at different aspects of Earth frequency. We can look at Benker lines and Schumann lines and all the other energy lines on the planet and human energy lines, and start to bring that into the education system so that from an early age, it's not just a few that understand, but it's the many.
Yeah.
So it's got to come back to for me, early education.
Yep.
Yeah, it's got to be given freely, that education.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with the kids, right? And here we are, sort of trying to leave a legacy of positive change, because I think we kind of pardon the expletive, fucked up a few things along the way. And now's the time to start to put things back in the right direction, and that's tough for a lot of people, including leaders. In the corporate world, they're under incredible pressure, and it takes real leadership to then, in a way, be seen to be breaking a bit from the pack to what people know, and they get in touch enough with their heart rather than being in that survival mode. The thing is that fear is what that whole system thrives on, is constant fear to get your to-do list done, or your performance is going to lack, you're going to be fired. That having that state of being is not healthy. It's not fun. And it just means a change in mindset. And through things like journaling, through having a mentor, coach, support, because leaders have a big responsibility for leading people in the right direction. And so, they're a control point that we need to support and help heading into the right direction.
So what I'm hearing you say, Tommy, a little bit, is those leaders need to nurture.
I think they need to be nurtured, and they need to nurture. I think it's a pay it forward thing.
Yeah.
Totally. Right.
Yeah.
It's an almighty task, but I don't think we have any choice, Adrian, to be quite honest.
No, the pendulum is swung, hasn't it, Tommy? Like it's swung.
Yeah.
And now, I really feel like it is a danger point on, many levels and humanity.
Yeah.
But I think the human spirit can bring it back.
I think so too.
The human spirit can bring it back.
Yep. Yep. And that's, yeah.
I have that. I have a bit more than hope. I have a trust in that. There's
Yeah.
a part of me that trusts that human spirit will, at the end of the day, will conquer and overcome, and we will swing the pendulum back. It may take a crisis or two. It may,
Right.
maybe some shattering thing that we all have to live through.
Yep.
But to get that pendulum back, something has to give.
Yep. And you mentioned two of the values there, and RQ right there, right? Hope and trust, you know, and then people acting with integrity, if they're being compassionate to their people and to their boss, right? Up as well, and to their peers. So that 360 view, expressing forgiveness. If you start with frequency and you have the courage to do it, and you let go of the ego, identity, and being righteous, right? And me, for one, I've been guilty of that in the past, right?
Yeah.
I know that.
Letting go of judgment, eh?
Okay. And where does it start? With oneself. I was doing it also to myself. And to a degree, it still kind of comes up there. But like the first step is, oh, well, I can feel that impulse in my body that's starting to do that. We've been here before. What's the way that, so becoming aware is that huge first step.
Yeah, back to consciousness, back to consciousness, back to consciousness. Yeah, always, every time.
Right.
And you're right. In the ticker coming through here, the corporate alchemist project is all about bringing the soul into business for heart-led leadership. That's the key, isn't it?
That's it. That's it. The heart knows, the mind thinks, and the heart's talking a lot more to the mind than the mind is to the heart. And if you cut this thing off, then you're cutting yourself off at the end of the day. Be it business, be it people, be it things, animals, etc., other life forms, and maybe even non-life forms. That
the conversation for Friday.
Right. Yes. That's a good way. So as we go to as we will head towards Friday, for good old Freedom Friday, and talking about relationship quotient and the spiritual logical.
So non-technical.
Yeah. All right. So I'll ask you the same question you asked me, Adrian. Then, I mean, what is the one thing coming from a more of the spiritual, logical, psychological bent between the two of us? What advice would you give for, let's say, corporate leader? I mean, anybody on the planet, really, but especially with corporate leaders, because they're a leverage point on the planet to make that transition.
Yeah. For me, Tommy, it's the art of stillness. Learn to be still for 5 minutes a day.
Boom.
The art of stillness. Just stop, being a human doing and be a human being for 5 minutes a day.
Right.
Not going to call it meditation, not going to call it relaxation. I'm going to call it stillness.
Yeah. Wow,
Can you stand or sit for 5 minutes a day in absolute stillness, physical stillness, emotional stillness, mental stillness, and spiritual stillness, and learn the art of stillness? I do it standing on one leg on the beach, like it's a yoga pose I've learned, and I love it. I stand on one leg in stillness, so I'm physically still in balance, I'm emotionally still in balance, I'm mentally still in balance, and I'm spiritually aware in balance for just a few minutes, and it's a profound place to be. I would suggest for anybody in a leadership, learn the art of stillness.
Wow, that actually is really big. And I got to tell you, having been a leader in the corporate world, it's so hard to do. And even today, a lot of the impulses are still biochemically switched on in my epigenetic framework, in my system, as I've been transitioning away from that even today with what I'm doing in wellness and health, to take. I meditate, once, twice a day, and I'm journaling. And journaling's that kind of segue into what you're talking about, it's connecting in. But then nothing. It's okay to do nothing. It's okay to find space in your day. Churchill did it.
Be still. Be still. Even if I'm suggesting it's not even meditation, it's another level past meditation called stillness. Be still. It's not about attempting to meditate, because that gets complicated.
That's still a to-do. Yeah.
Just be still. Like, just the outcome is I'm going to be still. Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's the outcome. And just aim for it. Just, I'm going to be still. Stand, sit on a chair, stand on one leg, sit on a bed, and just be still. That's what I would suggest. The art of stillness. That will be my go-to challenge to anybody in leadership. Learn to be still.
Right, because that will bring what?
Consciousness, awareness, possibility.
There we go. Finding space. Finding space.
A sense of knowing there's more than. Yeah. Right. It'll bring a lot. Because once we're still and we're in that presence of stillness, and everything revolves around that stillness, it's like there's a different seeing and different feeling and consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah, for me, stillness is one of the most profound spaces any human being, any place I've ever found, is the art of stillness.
Well, like you said, human being. I mean, we just need to look at what the word is, or the two words that have been connected to form this animal.
Yeah. There's a point. There's a point, Tommy, a bit of a story of when one's in the hurricane or in the tornado.
Yep.
If you get in the center, there's stillness.
Be the eye of the storm.
Yeah, that's stillness.
Be the eye
if
of
you move,
the storm. Yeah. You
can get caught up in the storm. But if you're still, perfectly still, you're not going to get caught up in the vortex. But as soon as you move, this vortex is going to suck you into the matrix.
Right.
So yeah, that'll be my answer, my friend, to that question, is stillness.
Become the eye of the storm. Okay. Mr. Adrian Hanks, that's a big finish for this Move It Monday, and as we look at physiology,
we go from Move It Monday to Stillness Monday.
Isn't that funny? Don't move anything, don't think anything, don't do anything. There's no space, stop.
But what we do though, we start with the movement because we have to get in touch. With the mind, with the body, with the spirit. And once we've mastered some degree of physiologically, emotion, spiritualogical, once we've mastered some, then we can head to stillness.
Right.
The stillness is like, another level of being.
Right. And look, and I've used, and I think I was talking about that on a video last week, where I use a transition of my day from a physical point of view. I'll actually go and use physical, coming from the other side, my physiology, to put me in that space, because I'll break away from the desk. I'll stop the dopamine addict stuff. I will do some exercise, taking some time out, breaking the cycle, to then put me in a space of, if you will, stillness in a crude form. But I've kind of taken a breath, I've stopped, and I've done some exercise to break the cycle, and then gone, okay, now different thought frequency. And I go from transactional to do to more of the being, but I'm thinking and I'm creating.
Yep.
And so it's a lot closer to what you're talking about.
So we can move beyond the creating and the thinking into stillness.
The stillness even, right?
Like I had about a 4K run this morning on the road and the beach, came back and sat in the sauna for about 20 minutes.
Beautiful.
And apart from putting some water on the steamer, I was in stillness for probably 12 minutes of that time, and it was exactly what I needed. It was
magic.
Real stillness.
Yeah. I'll be doing that later on today after the weights. But okay, so as we wrap this one up, man, we went deep on this one, Adrian.
We did, my friend. Like every week just goes deeper down the rabbit hole, doesn't it?
Jeez, my God. All right, so if well, you've got your launch coming up. We're going to give that another little.
I'm going to give that plug of all plugs.
Yeah, there it is.
If you're on the Goldie or somewhere close, if you can get in your Jetsons, UFO and fly to the Goldie.
Right. Yep.
Friday the 14th, so less than 2 weeks.
Right.
The launch is happening. Go to adrianhanks.com. Go to the 2084 page, and there's a synopsis of the book on there, which is great to read. Yep. Tickets available. You can buy the book, come to the launch, get a signed copy. It's all happening. Got some guest speakers. Got some yummy food from a lovely foodie that Tommy put me in touch with. So there's going to be some great food.
Shannon's going to be turning it on with some organic, clean superfood that's going to be handed around.
So it's going to be an all-round great evening. But the important thing, Tommy, is I spoke about that word you've mentioned here: trust, hope, forgiveness, compassion. The book is full of it. This is like the moving in to a new paradigm book. This is all about how we can do that consciously from a structure governmental perspective and an inner perspective, the whole gamut. So it's a hopeful book.
Fantastic. All right, and if people want to look you up, though, it's adrianhanks.com.
That's the easiest way to get them. adrianhanks.com, or even on LinkedIn, Adrian Hanks.
LinkedIn, okay. All right, cool.
Where can we find the great Tommy G?
Well, I'm glad you asked. If you want to look at my executive program, it's at biotechexec.net. Biotechexec.net, and there's actually an executive lifestyle assessment that if you complete that, then that'll give you a free 20 to 30 minutes executive lifestyle discovery, so we can check where there may be some rebalancing required. That if you keep it unbalanced for too long, we know what starts to happen. And also, LinkedIn, Facebook Messenger, Tommy Gallant. You can hit me up there as well, and or let's connect at tommygallant.com. So there we go. All right, Mr. Hanks, it's been wonderful again, as usual. Doesn't quite feel the same as when we're actually in the same EMF space, right?
Yeah. Or on the boat, like we were on Friday.
Or on the boat, on the big boat.
They're great.
Yeah, that's right. I have both. And that's going to be going through some transformation itself over the next 6 months as we turn that into something. So thanks again, my friend, and have a great week. And everybody as well, have a great week. Make sure you're getting that Move It Monday stuff happening, eating, moving, and sleeping the right way. And then in the second half of the week, we're going to be hearing from Mr. Hanks on Friday about the emotional, mental, and spiritual piece and how that relates to RQ as well. And next week, where are we going to be heading?
I think we might get into a bit of SQ next week.
Whoa, we're going to be going right out there for next week. All right. Okay, thanks, Adrian. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you on the next one, guys.